Coogs House. The House settlement has passed. College football, college sports, the Houston Cougars are changed forever on Friday night.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. Whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate your first listen each and every day. If you enjoy the conversation, but you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below what you put in your kolache. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. We got more on that fun later for the everydayers out there. Though the House settlement's been something that's been passed. We've been looking forward to this for a long time. So that's going to be the first segment. I'm going to hit that with Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On College Football. Second segment, I'll talk about what the House settlement means for Houston. And the third segment, I'm going to bring Spencer back and talk some about Keisean Henderson and the national impact of that commitment. But first, let's bring in Spencer. And when a national college football story breaks, we're going to bring in Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On College Football, to help us break it down and figure out what's going on exactly. Before we get too far, though, Spencer, you know I start these shows as a weird food question all the time. Do you even know what a kolache is before I get any farther?
A kolache?
Okay, well, never mind. So anyway, college football.
No, haven't heard of that one. I'd try it though. I'd try it. That's the way I roll. I don't even know what it is. I'll eat it. Sure.
There we go. I appreciate that. People in Texas will appreciate that. House settlement finally passes at like a very 5 o'clock news dumpy kind of feeling of the whole deal over the weekend. This is a gigantic deal. It changes all of college sports, college football being the big revenue builder and thus the most impacted by this from the macro level. $20.5 million per school. You saw that as someone who covers the sport across the entire national landscape on Friday and said, what?
I think it can be great for the sport. I really do. And on the timing of it, you ever see that Key and Peele sketch, Substitute Teacher, where he's saying the names wrong? I feel like the people that decided to put this news out on the day in which they did were like the Aaron guy who was just kind of looking around. Then he just goes, here. It's like, no, did you not hear? Oh, no, I said that. It's like, you just went into the weekend and they were just kind of going, oh, yeah, here. This changes college landscape, college sports forever and always. Yeah, here you go. Here you go. Have a good weekend. Yeah, see you guys. We'll see you Monday. So I did find that kind of funny. But the fundamental takeaway I have is that it can be great for college football. I am not going to speak for the other sports, which could 100% be impacted in a negative way. There is no other way to slice that I can see. If you are a college volleyball coach at a lot of schools, if you are a college softball coach for some schools, college baseball, or just any of those other secondary kind of sports, tennis, golf, whatever, this might not be great because suddenly the funds are just legally allowed to go in a specific direction. Now, the legal challenges are not done with a number of things, most notably on the distribution front for an athletics department. The Title IX considerations are going to come into play. If you have $20.5 million, the expectation that I've seen reported by On3 is that athletic departments are expected to allocate between $13 and $16 million for football and men's basketball. Okay, well, that wouldn't adhere to the spirit or maybe even letter of the law of Title IX. So is that how it's actually going to go? Or is that going to get distributed evenly across the department? That remains to be seen. But then the other side of the coin is the NIL factor. And that is, I think, easy to fly under the radar when you think about this stuff or when you talk about this stuff. But the fact that Deloitte, one of the big four accounting firms, is going to look at any third-party NIL deal, that's any deal from now on. This is already in effect. It doesn't officially start till Wednesday, June 11th. But any deal that is struck between a player and a third party, which includes collectives, that is now going to be reviewed by a Deloitte-run body of people, I guess you call it, whatever commission, and they're going to assess whether it is fair market value and whether it is essentially a smart use of money if it is $600 or more. So teams that want to go out and have their collectives pay $1 to $2 million for a good but not great starting corner, or any starting corner for that matter, via the transfer portal or an elite 5-star recruit, this NIL review group is going to be able to look at that, and if they don't deem it to be an efficient use of funds, effective, I don't really understand what the criteria are there, then they can say you can't do that particular deal.
Well,
now,
what's to say effective? Effective could mean you're paying this dude a lot more than his market value is. Like what does effective even mean?
What do you determine? And this is going to get challenged too, because how in the world are you determining market value as an accounting firm in the name, image, and likeness space when the precedent only goes back about 3 years in college sports, and we have schools all over the place that are willing and predating NIL have been willing to pay really high amounts of money for these players? How in the world are you, that's going to get challenged in court? I don't know if the NIL collective monitoring group is going to win. I'm not a lawyer. That's just my guess based on how these legal cases have gone over the years. It has tended to go against the power brokers that try to limit the earning potential of college athletes. That general notion has been struck down consistently by the courts. And they have said, no, you can't do that because you wouldn't be able to do this in any other field. These are student athletes, yes, but they are legal adults. So if we allow them to serve in the military, then you have to be able to allow them to earn however much money someone's willing to pay. And I don't care what your fair market value is in your view, because someone is willing to pay them and they're not being coerced to do so, or nor are they doing so illegally.
I want to get to the Houston of this in the second segment. That's for my fans and I, because it's a basketball school too, right? That'll be impact us there. But what's keeping this from just going back to brown paper bags and envelopes stuffed in mailboxes and all that, Spencer? Because it feels like if I could do that and not have to go to Deloitte, I might just do that.
Yeah. My guess, I don't know that we have all the details as we're recording this show. The punishments, I think, are going to be incredibly severe. Incredibly severe. That would be my guess. That's the only way to prevent that from happening. I'm sure it will still go on. They'll just be even more careful about it than they were back in the day. But I want to get back to my original point about why this could be great if this system goes in place. If you are not allowed to have your NIL collective just throw an insane amount of money at insert college football player that is in the transfer portal or is coming out of high school, and everyone is operating within restrictions on what they can pay players with their athletic department's budget. Like if you have a salary cap of $20.5 million for your entire department, and you're going to allocate, the schools that care the most about football or men's basketball combined are going to put $16 million, let's say, into those sports and $4 million into the rest, which is not nothing to have for the rest of the athletes on campus, but it's certainly not comparable, obviously, right. Or not in the same vein. If you are able to do that, what you are moving towards is what I have long advocated for in Major League Baseball. A salary cap. Because I firmly believe you should reward teams, schools, institutions, whoever, that care enough to raise the money, that have the money and are willing to spend it. I say that as a Mariners fan whose ownership refuses to spend the money needed to go win a World Series. Pay for a freaking first baseman, okay? They are punished year after year for not doing that. That needs to be balanced with the fact that the payroll of the Dodgers and the Rockies is a gap that is comparable to Alabama and South Alabama, and yet they're playing the same sport? And we're going to sit here and pretend that they should go compete for the same championship or that they're capable of doing so? Of course they aren't. Of course they aren't. So this idea of instituting somewhat of a salary cap I think still does to some degree reward the schools that put maximum investment in, but it doesn't allow them to run away with it the way I think they do now financially. I think that it allows for the possibility, if everything stays in place as they're designing it to be rolled out, I think it allows for the possibility of leveling the financial playing field in college football and, yes, basketball and beyond. But that's an if. That is an if, because to your point, Parker, it used to be illegal to pay players. We all know what happened. So if it's illegal to give a huge NIL deal to Carson Beck to go to Miami, and Deloitte says, no, you can't pay him more than, $500,000, and then Miami just on the side brings, I don't know, a bag of cash with another $1 million in it. It's a lot of cash, but somebody can make it happen. Like, if that's what you have to do, maybe that's what they'll have. Maybe that's what they'll have to do.
I want to get into what this means for Houston in a second, but first, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because the NBA Finals are in full swing. 1-1, a couple great games, big clutch performances on one end, big dominant performances on the other. Every night of the NBA playoffs seems to have delivered some sort of a big-time performance or a crazy ending or just something you feel like you've never seen before. FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action and stay in the game like never before. Tip-off live, does not matter. Player props, performance trends, same-game parlays, all kinds of ways to have more fun and stay in the action and win big. If you put down your first $5 bet and it hits, you get $200 back in bonus bets with FanDuel.com. If you're new to FanDuel, it's a perfect time to sign up. Again, FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it hits, that's $200 back in bonus bets. Make every moment with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Parker Ainsworth with Locked On Coogs here. So we talked some about the house settlement passing. I want to stress this was like a chaotic weekend in college sports. We got handed this big nugget of information on Friday evening, like news dumpy feeling Friday evening. And from there, the weekend went on and we've got no answers. But I do want to talk about what this house settlement means for Houston, because Houston's in an interesting place. Houston and new athletic director Eddie Nunez have confirmed they're going to pay the full amount. So if the number is officially set at $20.5 million, the school will be paying athletes $20.5 million allocated as the NCAA allows. We'll get to that in 1 second, but this does not stop NIL deals. As Spencer pointed out here, NIL deals will have to be approved, and they'll have to go through certain crossing of T's and dotting of I's and so on. But there is no change in the fact that NIL will also play a part in paying athletes. The roster will not be football roster, basketball roster, whatever, will not be just one or the other. That's one big misnomer on this. As far as Houston and the Big 12 goes, what I do think is interesting here, right, is that the Big 12 has schools like Houston who said they're all in. They have schools like Texas Tech, who have been for a long time now. The Cody Campbell money has been going for a little while there. You've also got schools like Iowa State and West Virginia. I'm like, can they keep up with this? You've got the whole spectrum competing in the Big 12 conference, right? Which makes me appreciate where Houston is, where they're saying, okay, we're all in on this. We're going to pay every cent possible. Every cent possible, right? I also think it's worth pointing out with Houston that it's in a unique spot and that they're rebuilding the football program. Football still steers the ship as far as making money goes. There's no better thing on campus than a sold-out football game. It hadn't happened a whole lot in the last couple of years. Obviously, selling out a football game does more for the financial part of the campus than any other event. I take a basketball game, any other event, right? On campus anyway. The other part of this, though, is that the basketball program has brought in a lot of money. We talked about after the Final Four run, how many billions of dollars you could are incalculable because of how many eyeballs could play university, the marketing that brings, the amount of people that just applied to be a part of the University of Houston after that run, all of the social media cachet and the way that you try to monetize that is different now than it ever was before and all of that, right? Obviously, basketball deserves its fair share of this too. And estimates have long been that Houston's going to find a way to kind of be at the top singular percentile of non-Big East schools in terms of paying the basketball revenues the highest dollar possible, while also being at the top 10% model of the football schools, right? And that is the goal being to be competitive in both. The goal is to be allocating this money where you are competitive in both. As Spencer pointed out, if Title IX plays a role in this, and it probably should on most moral compasses, right? It could dramatically shift how that money goes. Now, one thing to monitor here as Houston fans is at a school that has a dominant basketball program and the culture has been built and set on and so forth well before any of this was a problem or an issue or a deal at all, right? The Big East, which is the UConns, the Marquettes, the St. John's, right? They don't have the same football problem that a Houston does as far as paying any of that house settlement money. Those schools can just give all of their house money to men's basketball. I guess UConn does have a football program technically, right? But that does mean that we're shifting how that goes. The other piece of this for Houston will be that, it's not the revenue share necessarily. The volleyball program is stupendous, right? We've seen the golf program have, I guess I was about to say high marks, but technically it's really low marks, right? And then we also want to rebuild the girls' basketball program, rebuild softball, rebuild baseball. It almost feels weirdly like something's going to have to give, but that's not necessarily the case. Houston also joined the Big 12 in 2023 and is embarking on getting their full revenue share very soon. That revenue share could almost be exactly the $20 million we're talking about here, right? And so I'm not saying they're going to use it exactly 1-to-1 or anything quite like that, but I do think that weirdly Houston and by turn Cincinnati and BYU and Central Florida all get to join in a way that this actually times up very well. All four of those schools can take their new funds from being a full revenue share member of the conference and dump that into their house money settlement, so into the payrolls, right? As far as the collectives and building NIL programs go, obviously working with Deloitte's going to be interesting for Houston programs. But Houston, I'm here to tell you, has done stuff pretty much by the book. For all the flack people want to give Houston NIL programs, they're not like beating around the bush with things. This is very much a thing that they're doing the right way and are, aiming to do in the right way. And so I think that should work pretty smoothly for Houston. I'd be more interested to see how it does for competitors of Houston that maybe want to do things a little bit more around the edges or maybe off the book, so to speak, right? Houston, though, you're going to look at them as doing something that's going to be in the top 1 percentile of non-Big East basketball programs. And you're going to look at them being in the top 10 percentile of football programs. And what that's going to mean is that you're probably not going to have a whole lot of cash for other things at the moment. And that's going to be, I think, problematic to some. But the basketball program is going to need their due. They've earned the right to have all of that. The football program is always going to be the big revenue dog, so they're always going to get their fair share of that. And how this shakes out the rest of it will undoubtedly unfold more over the course of the next few months as this becomes more and more unraveled. One thing that's not unraveled, though, Keisean Henderson's a Coug. Spencer could not stop talking my ear off about it. He wanted to talk about it, so we got to bring him back and talk about it one more again. So let's bring back Spencer. But first,
big news in Cougar country. 5-star quarterback Keisean Henderson has shut it down. It's over. Like Vince Carter at the dunk contest, it's over. Parker Ainsworth of Locked On Cougs is here to discuss. It wasn't just big news that Houston was in the running for Keisean Henderson. It was even bigger news when he committed to Houston, Parker. And now he comes out right as official visit season is starting to ramp up for literally everybody across the country. And he says, yeah, I was going to visit Florida State this week. They won a national championship like 11 years ago. And, no, not doing that anymore. We're gonna stick with the Houston Cougars here. So Keisean Henderson is locked in. Let's talk about the impact before we talk about the player. How big is this for Willie Fritz and company?
Huge. Cannot discuss how big it is really, because it's 5-star. At one point was the number one kid in Texas, number one athlete in Texas. And you mentioned Willie Fritz, and obviously Houston being hometown plays a big role here. But Willie Fritz specifically coached Michael Bishop, who is Keisean Henderson's head high school football coach in college, in junior college, and built this relationship. And it speaks highly of that. It does all these different layers to it. A big, big week and weekend for the Houston Cougars.
Yeah, and this is a name that I think when he first committed to Houston, I'm sure there were plenty of people out there. I bet you could troll some YouTube commenters if you wanted to at this point in time, who probably thought, perhaps not unfairly, he's not sticking with Houston. He's going to visit Florida State. He's going to visit another school. He's not going to stick with the Big 12 Cougars, who have been a Big 12 team for about an hour. Because don't forget, Parker, the narrative, which has plenty of data behind it, is that 5-star recruits don't go to the Big 12. And here Willie Fritz is in year 2. I understand there's a hometown connection there. This is still an impressive poll. I mean, certainly there's a benefit, but you use anything you can in your favor on the recruiting trail. You do whatever you have to do. And the fact that Willie Fritz got this done and he now projects as the Cougars quarterback of the future, massive, massive stuff going into year 2.
Yeah, Houston was in early and told him he could play quarterback when he was listed as an athlete. That was a big deal. And I mentioned Michael Bishop earlier. Michael Bishop, for very different reasons, in his time period, was told he couldn't play quarterback either. Fritz told him he could at junior college, and so on. So he wanted to be an all everything Hall of Famer at Kansas State. Now insert Keisean Henderson. He's an athlete. People tell me he can't play quarterback. Willie Fritz says he can. And at the time, they're like, okay, this is just he's trying to tell the world he's a quarterback, and Houston offered him as a quarterback. So everyone nationally was like, this is just him making a signal or some sort of a play like you're talking about. And he's very firm, no, this is not that kind of a mark. This is not that kind of a move. He's sticking with the Cougars. He's not visiting anybody else. And the timing of it, Spencer, you cover national college football stories. The timing of it's so, so important for this.
Yeah, it is, because this is the time of year where kids go on visits and, yeah, I'm going to back off of that commitment that I made a few weeks ago. Or, yeah, I've been committed to this school for, almost a year now for, there are plenty of kids. I mean, schools have already gotten started on their class of 2027 recruiting, and that starts right now. You can have those guys that say, I want to go through official visit season without having the, kind of tag of, he's already committed elsewhere. I want to go into it with an open mind. I want to give these schools an open chance. For him to shut it down right now is just huge, and I think speaks volumes to the job that Willie Fritz has done so far, the job he can continue to do. I always like the hire of Willie Fritz from Tulane, because I talk about Tulane on this show plenty, Parker, especially in the realignment space, as could they wind up in the Pac-12 one day? They'd be a prime target if they were not already in the American Conference, probably. But the reason that they are seen as that sort of school, that they have premier G5 brand power, not quite on Boise State's level. Nobody's there because they're the original Cinderella. Right. The reason they're in that same discussion, the reason people see them that way, is Willie Fritz. This wasn't a Tulane program that was, competing with Boise to be the best Group of 5 team in the country every year. No, he built them up. So I always like that hire. And I think this is just another step towards, Willie Fritz proving to the Houston fan base, I can win here at a high level.
Yeah, and you mentioned that he built up Tulane. It really started more like 8 years in the making before he kind of hit the national level. Getting a 5-star prospect that plays quarterback would obviously be a pretty big deal there as far as fast forwarding that timeline with the University of Houston. Tulane bluntly has some barriers in the way as far as who can get in, who can't get in, and whatever that other schools like Houston don't have. And then you also enter NIL space and all that, and the house settlement that you opened with, and all those things too. Keisean Keisean specifically is this like charismatic guy that wears the raccoon skin cap to 7-on-7, and he gets the MVP trophy at the Navy All-American game with that on his head as well. He's already out recruiting people online. Davian Gross is a guy that a 4-star wide receiver that took a visit to Oklahoma, and he's posting pictures from Oklahoma over the weekend, and Keisean Henderson is retweeting with like, "But go Coogs," right? Like this guy's already in it. He's recruiter number 1 for the season, for the off season right now. Big deal on all of those fronts, and it also, Willie Fritz, I think people worried about, like, does he have time for a long rebuild because he is a little bit older guy? No one hated to hire from an X and O's or a culture standpoint, like you said. And this certainly fast forwards all that in a way that I think puts them, silencing on all those problems too.
Let's talk about the player himself. You mentioned that, not every school necessarily wanted him to play quarterback or was going to let him do that because he's incredibly athletic, but he's maybe not the world's most refined passer. What type of player do you think steps foot on campus next year? I presume, correct me if I'm wrong, he's an early enrollee and plays in the spring game next year for the Cougs.
Yeah, I'd imagine so too. And full disclosure, after his sophomore year, I thought he was going to be the kind of kid that had the Ryan Tannehill kind of program. You show up a receiver for a year or two and then move into quarterback. And then his junior quarterback season was tremendous. He threw for over 3,000 yards, had 30 touchdowns. I mean, really impressive at the Texas high school football. He's not playing a big high school, but at the Texas high school football level. Obviously had his rushing touchdowns and stuff too. He's an electric athlete. I think the deal that is impressive, though, when you talk to him, or our buddy, our mutual friend, Brian Smith, has talked to him in person, he's really, really smart and understands the IQ stuff of the game, right? And that comes from working with Bishop so closely. That comes from being a football junkie at an early age. And so it's more about fine-tuning some mechanics and stuff like that. He understands the game at a high level, quarterback level. And that's a big deal for guys who are athletes playing quarterback. And I will say, I always liked a fast quarterback, though, Spencer. I know you're opinion. I don't want my quarterback to get to touch the ball every play that the defense is trying to kill to be slow. I never really understood why.
I don't want him to be slow. I just, I don't want him to be a statue back there. I think we've moved on from those days where a guy, is Phillip Rivers running in the pocket. Like, that's not anybody's desired quarterback.
Another Phillip Rivers going on visits, like a junior or a second, or one of his 27 kids is whatever.
Okay, I know you have like actual reason to feel old because you've got like kids and responsibilities and stuff. I don't want to feel closer to that, so we're not going to discuss some Phillip Rivers Jr. nonsense on the show. We're not going in that particular direction. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Cougs, great as always. I have another question about this whole playoff, or one of you rather has a question that I was thinking about. Will it ever actually be equal?